They get to see me make mistakes and all this other stuff, and that makes me a little bit vulnerable, but part of my artistry is just having that connection and relationship with the people that support my art. I'd love to call them customers, but I don't think that's fair because they had to believe in me first.
Welcome to the Origins of Creativity podcast, brought to you by Bookling Media, where we discover the magic behind creativity through the stories of passionate creators. Listen in and fill your creative vessel with delightful insights and uplifting tales. Hello, you are listening to the Origins of Creativity podcast. I am your host, Becky Gehrisch. Thank you for joining us. In today's interview, we will discuss the importance of creativity in life, the societal perception of art, and the craftsmanship involved in making musical instruments. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app. This way you won't miss the next episode and it helps others find us. My guest today is George Schlub, a master craftsman of Schlub Brass Works. From the United States of America to Singapore and Germany, he has honed his skills to produce impressive handcrafted horns for musicians around the world. George has crafted brass instruments for 15 years and has worked in the musical instrument industry for 50. He is one of the only rotary valve trumpet makers in the U.S. His Revolution trumpet was designed specifically for the U.S. Army with modern specifications. Welcome to the show, George Schlub.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on, and I'm looking forward to learning more about your brass instrument craft and what led you down this creative path. So first and foremost, could you tell our listeners a little about your custom trumpet and what makes it different from others? Just so we kind of have a visual.
Sure. So I am one of the only, if the only, top action rotary valve trumpet makers in the United States. So what that is normal trumpets are pistons. They have a piston valve that's easy to see in your head. It's just a pump valve. It goes up and down, and that's how it shifts from one length of tube to another. The rotary valve is more like a French horn. And so it rotates, and that's how they shift from one length of tubing to the next. And so the traditional rotary valve trumpet, you hold it like a sandwich. So there's side action. So it looks just like the French horn. It sort of works like the French horn. And then the top action rotary valve instrument that I design and make looks from a distance like you're playing a piston valve. So it's top action. So for us American and French players, it works the same. It looks the same, but it's a little bit different.
Okay, great. And then we have a visual in the photo of you for the episode, so people can see the design that you did. And it's got this really cool curve to it. Does that change anything with the sound, or is it just part of how things will work together to make it work the way you need it to?
So if we're talking about the Revolution trumpet, that in and of itself is more like what the Americans play. So it has a long lead pipe and a shorter bell, and then that pigtail that's in that back allows the valves to be in a position where you can hold the trumpet a certain way and play it a certain way. It doesn't really affect the sounds or the playability. The look is part of the function.
Okay. So we actually have a recording that we're going to add to the podcast here of a part of the U.S. Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps playing Shenandoah. Is that correct? Did
Yes.
I say that all right? Where did they record this?
So they were on military tattoo in Edinburgh, Scotland, and they were warming up for a performance, and they just played that.
Is that the only group so far that has this trumpet?
Well, so this particular trumpet that they're playing, the Revolution trumpet, is an instrument I designed specifically for the U.S. Army. And they had certain requirements. They wanted it to look like a marshaled instrument from the past. and they wanted it to perform like a modern instrument. So um, you have modern specs, so bore size. They gave me some examples of make and models of piston trumpets that they wanted it to be like. And basically, what we ended up with is an instrument that I like to play. And so I have three of them right now of my own that I play either taps for funerals for police, fire, military, or just playing. In fact, this weekend I'll be at the Ohio Renaissance Fair, and I may be playing this instrument as in a Highland Scottish style group where I just kind of sit in with the band because they, quote, need more brass. Then there's the German side, which I make a German trumpet that's top action rotary valve. Basically, both of these instruments allow you to play a rotor valve instrument with one hand. And then you can conduct or you can shenanigans can play or whatever. They play differently. If you're a trumpet player, you know the difference between a German trumpet and the regular French style trumpet, Besson trumpet, Bach trumpet. But this instrument, again, I think it's fun. I think it's sexy, and it's an interesting visual instrument and easy to play.
I love it. And so, okay, so let's listen to a little bit of the Revolution trumpet that you made by the U.S. Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. Here we go. That is so cool. I find that amazing. It was beautiful how they just sounded so it was just a very pure sound. I don't know if that's just their skill or a combination it sounds like of what you've made with that. So, oh my gosh.
Well, as an artist, so I when I hear when I heard that, so a little tear came a little bit, and but also I thought that sounds too good.
It's
It's
beautiful.
like somebody was playing an organ. Like all the
Mhm.
instruments worked together extremely well. And in hindsight, I mean, the Army, one of the problems that they've been having over the last 2 decades is whatever ceremonial instruments they have don't necessarily, each one doesn't necessarily play the same. So you
Okay.
have 30, 35 instruments that don't play the same. And so you have all these pitch differences and intonation differences, and it's hard to sound the same. Whereas one of the things that we worked on and I think achieved was that we were able to make 35 instruments, 30 that they have that play the same. They just play the same across the board.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah, and the other thing is because they're modern pitch, and everything else, you can play them with another group and blend in.
Okay, so here's the questions that are going to get us kind of a little deeper into you a little bit, and I really want to know what made you decide I'm going to make the trumpet, and work and change it and make it my own. Did somebody come to you? Did you just decide to work on this on, what started everything for you? I guess if you wanted to, you could share what started your musical passion perhaps as well.
Well, so I come from a musical family. Um, I was born in 1971, and 3 years later, I'm wearing a tuxedo that my grandmother Schlub made for me, and I'm playing violin at a nursing home on stage. And not very well. I think it was Twinkle Twinkle or something like that. But I was, and I've kind of continued that through the rest of my career. I like clothes. I like tuxedos. The senior citizens really enjoy the show, And then with my dad, my uncle, and my mother, we've been playing music since then. And so I took up the piano, I think at age 5. I played that for another 20 years. I took up the trumpet when I was 12. I played with one of the first youth brass bands in Ohio, in the United States for that matter, um, when I was in high school. And so I've been playing music for a long time. And my father was a violin maker, is a violin maker. And so I worked in his shop. And I have been working with my hands for as long as I can remember, making furniture, plumbing, violins, what have you. I also make movie props, Star Wars costumes. The list goes on.
I love it.
When you can do something with your hands, I'm also a visual artist. I paint murals, I draw, and what happens is when you can do something like that, you can create. And I also have a scientific side of myself where if I know how something works, I can make it. And sometimes I can make things that I'm told you can't make. And then all of a sudden I make it and it works. So a lot of the tooling that went into the instruments that I make, we make our own tooling. And when I say we, I mean my wife and my apprentice, who's a big guy, so we use a lot of his muscle. And yeah, that's mostly the way that works. Um, so I ended up in Singapore, and I played music. I played trumpet, and in Singapore they didn't have a lot of shops that could really repair things. They had shops that could buy replacement parts and replace it, but if you had to make a screw, for instance, they weren't able to do that. And so I became the first and only brass maker in Singapore. So we lived there for 10 years, and then I went to Germany and I learned how to really work on brass. And I kind of joined what I learned from my father in the violin business and what I learned in Germany about the brass and the trumpets. And for maybe 12, 13 years now, Schlub Brass has been producing instruments until, like I said, the U.S. Army got a hold of me when we moved back to the United States, and we made an essentially American made, American designed instrument.
I find it fascinating to hear you being in different places, and I'm assuming picking up different, ideas. In Germany, I'm sure there was, an influence there for you too with how they did things, or I just find that exposure to different cultures also very cool.
Yeah, so the Germans have been doing rotary valve trumpets for ever. Now, I'll probably get this wrong, but I think the first trumpets were coming out of Germany, and those trumpets were all rotary valve. There were a few, even back in the day, pre World War II, that were top action rotary valve. Again, this allowed for cavalry to be able to hold on to the reins of their horse at the same time they're playing trumpet. So bugle calls.
Oh,
I mean, so the other thing about the trumpet versus the violin is you very rarely saw a violin on the warfield, on the battlefront, signaling anybody because it wasn't military signaling device, whereas trumpets and bugles are.
okay. So I get it now. So they could have their hands free for other things. I love that. And then you mentioned with doing things with your hands and doing all kinds of artistic things, And so what would you be doing if you weren't creating, I guess, with your hands? I mean, is there anything?
Well, so again, when I was in kindergarten, I was asked, what do you want to be? Or, that question. And I said, I want to be a violin making motorcycle cop. Because at the time, I was just completely taken up with chips with Eric Estrada. Complete side note, Eric and I met each other in LA for a few hours, and we rattled on and on and on about that side of my life.
Oh, I love it.
And that was fun. So if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I would be pretty much devoting myself to police work. And I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to shout out to Harveysburg, Ohio, home of the Renaissance Fair, where I'm currently the chief of police. And so I am doing that. Now, but you said, what if I don't use my hands? I can't not use my hands. So every department I've been involved in, I have come up with a logo for the police cars, or I'm actually about to paint a mural on the side of our building. Um, and so I'm always doing stuff like that, or I'm teaching in the police academy. And while I might not be using my hands there, I'm still creating something. So I think the main thing is even if I wasn't making musical instruments, I would still be creating something because that's who I am. So it's not going to make me rich, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, that kind of makes me wonder when it comes to the arts and making, 100% living on the arts. Is it something that you've thought about where, does society want to see these murals, or do they care about the sound? Do they really think about it deeply? Because I always wonder if, we take that for granted too much. And even if everybody has that creative piece to us, do we take it, for granted on our own as well? But I didn't know what you thought.
So I'll give you the law enforcement answer, and that is it depends. That's my world there. I mean, you have all these different things, all these different questions, all these different outcomes, but ultimately it depends. And what I mean is, so yes, sometimes I forget about the art. Sometimes I forget, um, or you don't necessarily see. I mean, it's not tangible, right?
Right.
Um, you don't see someone feeling when they look at a piece of art. The logo stuff, I described the logo. So Harveysburg, for instance, is the village by the lake. So I'm going to paint a sunset over the lake, and you have the silhouette of the village. And then on the shore, I'm going to paint the battlements of the Renaissance Fair to represent a wink and a nod to that. And when I
Nice.
described this, well, so yeah, that somebody had a reaction just like you. They thought, oh, wow, that's clever. And I'm like, well, it was that or a self portrait of me riding a Tyrannosaurus Rex wrapped in the American flag with an AR-15 and a flamethrower. It's so then I just made you laugh because you saw that. So I just created two things and I got an emotional response, which is I think what art is about. But it's more than that because if we are creating, we're not destroying,
Mm, absolutely
right?
true. And you're right. And I guess I don't think of it so much about the reactions fully, like you described. And you're right. You can't see what, unless they tell you, of course, or you hear their laughter or whatever their reaction would be. And I think you're right that it yeah, gives somebody something, then you're getting something from that as well, their reactions, and that's definitely true.
So the pain of producing 30 instruments in 90 days.
Ooh,
Now, it took a lot longer to get all the stuff together, but this is from bending the bells to plating to reassembly to delivery. This took 90 days, and that was a few days before the inauguration. And whatever your politics, I really don't care, because to me, it's about tradition.
sure.
And so I got a phone call from someone that, and they said, turn on your radio because the inauguration is going on and the ceremony is going on. And I was listening to the Star Spangled Banner. I was listening to the other stuff that was going on. And the guy on the phone is like, those are your trumpets.
Mm,
So, when I'm sure when people see, in fact, I know it. When people look at my instruments, when I'm about to play taps or something else, they, what, 30 of those? You made those in your basement in Miamisburg?
that's incredible.
So yeah, right now we take a lot of that for granted. There are factories out there that can make an instrument just with machines, just stamping stuff out, and you miss touching it and bleeding because you cut yourself on things, and or you sweat because you're the one bending the stuff instead of a machine. And so it's the journey.
Mm.
It's a high five for every bell that bends without breaking.
Hmm.
So for all the creation that we're doing and the tools we make, nothing's perfect, right? I'm basically making an instrument the way they did in 1860.
Wow.
It's all handmade. So I think if we've lost something as a society, we've lost that. And in the 1700s, the 1800s, everything was handmade. Everything was made to be beautiful and a piece of art on top of um, it's aesthetically pleasing, it's functional, etc., etc. Musical instruments used to have engraving all over and a little splash of gold. Not because I think that the artist was pretentious, but because we're not just making a thing, we're making something beautiful. And I'm not saying art is lost because we're still creating, but it's easy to forget what used to be.
Absolutely, and I can also see it as it was a way of life, and now it feels just like an additional piece, an extra bonus if it happens to be this. But and it's also rare to find that. And I think if we saw that more, this is this thing that took X amount of hours or that kind of time versus just came off the assembly line and it's in our hands the next day kind of thing. So
I'm going to go back. I think you were saying something about making a living doing this. I think it's possible. I'm going to throw another guy's name out, Ryan Walker. He is an engraver of musical instruments and he hand engraves. You send him a
wow.
bell or a saxophone, he'll hand engrave it like they used to do 100 plus years ago.
Wow.
And so I have a bell that he did for me that I have not turned into a trumpet yet that is engraved from one end to the other, like the old pre-World War II ceremonial trumpets. So a community would buy an instrument for a bugler and they would have this engraved and presented to so and so. And I have a couple of these Liberty instruments. And again, that's also what inspired me. But here's a guy, Ryan Walker, who is doing it. And that's what he
Mm.
does. Um,
Wow.
there are other small brass makers in the world, in the United States, and they are all making a living. I will say we went through a time in 2019 where artists suffered. So when COVID was big, the music kind of died, right? We didn't have a lot of live performances, so your local artisans, your basement artists, stuff like that, really took a hit because nobody wanted our instruments because nobody was playing. So I am seeing now a comeback, which is good. So my instruments, there are a few other makers around. The custom instruments are coming back. They're not cheap, but they're not expensive. And then again, you could pay a ton of money. How much does that go back to the artist? We are struggling with raw materials right now. Some of the materials are coming from Germany. I know a lot of artists use materials out of Taiwan. They're suffering a little bit because different tariffs that are in place are affecting the price of our raw materials. And again, that at the end of the day affects the bottom line. So the biggest difference between me and them is I'm in my home and
Mm.
I price my instruments because I want to see them played. I'm not a pretentious guy, and I'm not saying guys that charge a lot of money for what they do and how they do it are pretentious, but I don't sell magic. I don't. All I want is a connection and build a relationship with the people that want to play my instruments. And those connections have lasted since I started doing this. And this is, for me, I think we've been doing this for 15 years, maybe. And that's brass. That doesn't include the string instrument business. I've made one violin in my career, and I made it out of carbon fiber, just to be different.
I love that. That's cool.
And my dad helped. We did that together. And he
Nice.
shook his head the entire time. And because again, this when we make art, when we create something, and this goes in any aspect in the world, law enforcement, government, anything. If you create over destroy, you're making the world a better place.
That's brilliant. Yes, so so true. And like you said, the connection. We're all very separated. It seems like, and to have somebody make something for you, to buy something from someone who actually made it, takes that machine out of it. The connection personally, the connection as you play something or make something or receive something handmade. It does. It's very powerful, and it's so important. And I'm so glad you said that about the connection, and that's so true.
Well, can I turn this around for a second?
Sure.
So I happen to know you're an artist. You,
Yes.
you you're a visual artist. You paint and draw.
Yes.
Um, do you ever let people watch you do it?
I don't enjoy that. No, not really,
Well,
because it's like the process. It's like it's a mess until finally I'm ready to say it's fine. Yeah, that's how I am. I don't know if that's what
well,
you wanted to
so
hear.
no, yeah, no, that's what it is.
Oh, okay.
The creating is messy.
Mm,
Um, like I said, me and Josh O'Mates, my apprentice, we high five every time we bend a bell without breaking it. The bells are all handmade by a man in a shop in Germany, and all he makes is bells. These are very special. And so
right.
we're using technology that's hundreds of years old. And George, why don't you use CNC machine to do it? Because I don't have $1 million. So
Mm,
when you hand make something like this and you break it,
mm.
then it's bleepity bleepity, oh man, and we got to sit down for a minute.
I can relate. Yeah, if I'm painting something and then a whole section goes wrong, I have to sit down and repaint it, and that's going to take x amount of hours, and it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. Instead of just doing something digital where you could hit the undo button to a degree, it's definitely frustrating, and it definitely becomes this almost not, like you said, you don't make magic in that sense, but it becomes this magical thing of this is how it turned out, and somehow it worked out.
But if you have someone watch you,
Mm.
and the good watcher, the one that keeps their mouth shut and just sits there with their knuckles in their teeth, watching, right? And
Right.
then you get done, they've seen everything behind the curtain. They they've seen, and at the end of the day, it's like it's still magic.
Wow. Yeah.
So
They
I
experience that with you, right?
yes, so I in Singapore, um, people were allowed in my shop. So when I worked for another shop, people would come into the shop just to watch me work. And when I moved the shop to my house in Singapore, people would come in. Of course, now it's different. They would come in on the weekends, and I would make a pancake breakfast for all my customers. And then we would all sit around and talk about instruments and so going back to the visual arts, a lot of the designs for these instruments, and I have the originals, are all on napkins
Oh, great.
and coasters and little scraps of paper. My wife, Damar, has framed some of these things, and we have piles of the drawings that will eventually go into some sort of coffee table book. But again, everything starts off with what we're doing right now. We're talking about it. And the talking, again, normally, instead of, having a cigar in my hand or something like that, I have a pen. And as we're talking, I'm sitting there. I designed a quartet of herald trumpets, the
Oh,
long
wow.
bell trumpets that will be featured at the Ohio Renaissance Fair next year, I hope.
Oh, wow.
So those, again, it was all over a lunch. I think we were having Indian food at Amar's in Dayton, Ohio, and I drew all four instruments out on the napkin, and I showed the person, and how'd you do that? I'm like, well, here's what you told me, and here's what I
Right.
think it should be. And I'm actually even hoping that one or two of those I'll have finished before the end of the year.
That's really cool to hear.
And they also they in fact that's how Josh Omates and I became acquainted. He basically wanted to watch me do stuff because in this business, in the musical instrument manufacture business of makers, whether it's Stradivarius, Dave Monette, a tiny guy like me, whatever, there's always this magic and mystique, and where do you get these designs and how do you do it? And the dirty part is, I made six trumpets before I found the revolution. I made a dozen trombones till I found the right one for my wife, and then I sold it to somebody because they loved it. And it's it's dirty and dangerous, but at that moment where it goes from being an idea to a physical thing, I'm always there for it, right? But when other people get that chance, so that's why I'm saying yeah, they get to see me make mistakes and all this other stuff, and that makes me a little bit vulnerable. But part of my artistry is just having that connection and relationship with the people that support my art. I'd love to call them customers, but I don't think that's fair because they had to believe in me first.
That's a poignant remark, that to be vulnerable with this. And so many times, especially with Instagram or Facebook, anything that you see people creating, a lot of times it's processed to where it looks um easy. It looks like they just whipped it up, and you don't see all of the mistakes and the redos and the time and the everything is just sped up. And I think for younger artists out there, creators who are used to seeing that more so than not, this is a good reminder that it is messy, and to put that out there, I think people will maybe appreciate and value your art more than you thought. And for myself as well, I think I'll maybe make a point of letting that out a little bit, so that it's not something that just kind of snapped my hands and I just did it one afternoon and I'm done, kind of thing. And I think that's so important. And I'm really, really glad you shared that.
Well, so before we started all this, so I'm going to expose some of your magic. We talked about how this podcast might be available to schools. Uh, so I want to shout out to Ruth Nagy. When I knew her in the 90s, she was Ruth Cox. She was the art teacher at Linda McKinley High
Mm.
School in Columbus, Ohio. I have been, so part of my family, we're all visual artists. We all draw, sketch, paint. my father in his retirement is getting this resurgent in painting and trying to express himself that way. When I was in high school, I took an art class, and Ruth didn't teach me anything. She inspired me.
Mm.
And she told me that if I was ever on the Letterman show, that I needed to shout out and credit her with um, the success that I became. But what she did with humor and saying it's okay to put yourself out there, because as artists, we bear our soul. Every trumpet I make, every brass instrument, and my wife is like, can we make them sign a thing that, if they're done, they just give the instrument back, because she didn't want it to fall in the hands of somebody that didn't care, which I
Mm.
love.
Yes.
I can't do that, but this all goes back to this inspiration where Ruth basically got me to stop being my worst critic.
Mm.
She said, accept the praise that you get when you get it, because it's not always going to be there. Appreciate it and just keep creating. So, um, and I do credit her with, so I still paint, I still design, I still do that stuff, and everything goes into every aspect of my life. So I'll never just be a policeman. I'll be a policeman that designs stuff for our department. I'll try to design stuff, equipment or vehicles. I'll be an instrument maker. Josh pushed me out of trumpets into trombones, euphonium, and some bass instruments. And all of it, again, people do notice. I have faith that we are, as a society, turning and appreciating, if not the art itself, the the reason we have it. Again,
Right.
if you don't create anything and all you do is destroy, at the end of the day, all you have is a mess. So we have to keep creating.
Has your creativity in anything that you've done, has anything ever gotten you into trouble?
Well, define trouble, I guess.
Well, that's what I'm. You could take that any way, any way you want. But I guess I was thinking, has it turned out like you ran? It got you ran away from you, and all of a sudden you're in a place you shouldn't be, or you're not even sure why, but you've been creating. You had an idea. You're gonna go do a mural. You're gonna color on the wall, like that kind of thing.
I don't think I have created anything and released it into the world that I am not proud of. However, as a business, so we talked about making a living at this. As a business, this can be a very rocky career. So, to give you an idea, when I set to build 30 instruments for the U.S. Army, I had to send out, get quotes, find out what all my raw materials is going to be, and then I base the individual price on that. And there may be people out there that said, "Oh, you were way too cheap because that's more like just a regular instrument." And I'm like, "I'm a regular guy. What do you want? I want to see my instruments played." And it was perfect. And the valves are the most expensive part of this instrument. And in the process, so you put this bid together, the federal government says, "Okay, this is what we will pay for your instruments," and go. No deposit,
Mm.
no upfront payment, nothing. So then I have to fund everything.
Oh wow, yeah.
And so when the cost of the valves doubled
Oh.
for no particular reason,
Oh no.
um, and there's no way to recover that, that hurts. So
Yes.
as an artist, I mean, you pay for all your paint and you pay for
Hmm.
it up front. And so that got me into mental trouble.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists can possibly feel that kind of thing when they have to do a piece or something that they're, yeah, and especially if it doubles. Oh my gosh.
So the most expensive component to this instrument doubles, and we're talking 5 digits.
Ooh.
I could have bought a really nice car
Mm.
with how much the valves now cost. And again, times 30. Now, again, I'm not bankrupt. We were paying our bills. That was a bit of profit that just disappeared. And emotionally it affected me a little bit. However, I'm not going to stop making instruments. And every inauguration where I see those instruments played, every military tattoo I see my instruments being played, I see my art on display for the world,
Mm.
and especially the United States. I'm patriotic. The idea that this instrument came from here, um, in the 1860s, that is the shape of trumpet you could buy. In the 1860s,
Mm.
you had two types of instrument. You had a side action rotary valve, you had a top action rotary valve, and that's what we were doing. And when Adolph Sax and those guys kind of came in and the Perronnet or piston trumpet showed up, that's when Herbert Clark started playing the cornet with the pistons and they left the rotaries behind. But in the 1860s, this is what we had. And I think they're beautiful looking, they're beautiful sounding, and I can sit and watch Facebook reels and the CNN, and I see these guys marching and playing my instruments, and I go, I did that.
Right. That kind of summarizes, I think, why, we create for ourselves, but we also create, like you said, for the communication, for seeing it out there, seeing people use it, enjoy it.
Yes, not to be confused for thumbs ups and likes.
Yes, but actually genuine, right?
Seeing it and seeing it
Yes.
be enjoyed. And
Yes.
I still can't help but get a little emotional when I accidentally click on that video and hear Shenandoah, and the guys were just warming up. They were just, hey, let's just throw this out there. And if you guys ever get the
Right.
chance to see the video visually, it's beautiful, but also just the sound. And these guys are amazing. We've got a bugler from Miamisburg, Ohio. She was super excited when we met up in DC. So yeah, I got in trouble mentally
Yes.
and financially. At some point, I've got to figure out how Stradivarius did it, where I get some patrons and they just pay me to be artistic. I'll probably have to buy a pair of tights or something. Uh, but I think we need to support the arts, visual arts, uh,
Absolutely.
sculpture, all of it, because that is what keeps the humanity in humankind.
I was thinking about that recently with all of the technology changing and, what really makes us human. And we're really going to have to struggle with that sooner than later. And I think actually people might be coming more to terms with the importance of it. I think we're probably going to see a resurgence in it, that something was handmade, that it wasn't just put out there by something else. And um, be reminded, hopefully, by, podcasts or books or things like this that remind people of that, that what they're doing is important for themselves and for others, and for the communication to keep us speaking and talking and sharing and sparking new ideas. And it definitely makes me proud to be an artist and to speak to people like you who have that creative drive, and to keep doing it, even if it's for you, just to see it out there. And for people who might be just starting into art, to kind of keep that in their mind, that they are doing something important, beyond anything that they would aspire to see, when it comes to their career. So we've talked about so many things. I am curious. to know what one thing, if you have one thing, that you are glad that happened in your life to lead you to this spot in your career. And maybe it was Ruth Nagy, again, or something else that, kept you going or just.
So shout out to Ruth Nagy. I love her. She and Sandra Cox, who was my theater teacher back at Linda McKinley High School. She is also not with us anymore. Uh, Ruth Nagy's out there kicking, and I'm sure crazy someplace. But 16 years ago, I met this lady, Damar Trier-Tati Nurshahid, and she's now Damar Trier-Tati Schlub. We had a 6 months courtship. By November of that same year, I was living in Singapore. And from there, so I had sold everything. I'd given everything away, sold everything. I rolled up with one trumpet. I bought another trumpet that nobody in Singapore could service because it was very unusual. And I started playing in big bands. And eventually I made a trombone for her. She started playing with me. We played with a German choir. And then we ended up touring all over Southeast Asia and Germany with
Oh,
this
wow.
group where I was conducting and playing. And again, that relationship, she supported me. In fact, she's my biggest fan. So because as an artist, we doubt
Mm,
ourselves, we doubt, what am I doing this for? I'm not making any money. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And then she has always been in my corner. And because of that, I went on to design a plastic trumpet. There was a moment there that was kind of a big deal. I helped design a plastic trombone. We have played music since we met. She played cello, I played a violin that my dad made, and we played in a group. And then music has always been part of our life. So, and you had said something earlier on in the episode about communicating in the world. The spiritual language that I have discovered is music.
mm,
So I'm playing in a brass choir that's specifically for the Lutheran Church. It's got Catholics, it's got Lutherans, it's got agnostics, it's got atheists, it had Muslims, it had Jews, it had everybody in the group, and we all played from our heart,
mm,
and we became immensely popular. Not because we were the tightest, greatest group. We just had everybody from 1 year playing to semi-professionals. And what we did was we loved what we made, which was
mm.
music. It was rooted in friendship. And I would not be here. Schlub Brass would not exist without Damar Schlub.
That's really, really beautiful. And I think that people need to have somebody in their corner. I mean, they need to have a buddy, a family member, someone that is supporting them like that, because that keeps us going. And I think that's what really makes people's art shine and continue. And like you said, sometimes things wouldn't happen unless you had that, support. I love that. Any closing thoughts that you might have, that you wanted to share with the people listening today?
The one thing I've learned is no matter how expert somebody is, don't believe them when they say it can't be done.
Mm,
Just don't.
that's perfect. I mean, that's how innovation happens. That's how everything, new designs, new technology, and just somebody says, "Okay, I'm gonna try it anyway," and that's perfect.
You know what? I got two more for you. I got two more for you.
Ooh,
The
great.
second most important one is it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Mm,
Nothing, nothing has ever been created by somebody who's comfortable.
ooh, I love that too. Okay.
Discomfort, not um, discomfort really makes people try to figure out a better way. And finally, and Late in my life, I learned this, and it has served me well. Every day I spend with me is a good one. As soon as you start allowing yourself to care about you and love you for you, all the obstacles go away.
All right, I'm taking notes. I'm going to use this as my mantra in the mornings. Thank you. That's awesome. I love that.
Every good thing that has happened to me in the last 17, 18 years is because I finally decided it was okay to be with me.
Mm.
And again, as an artist, you don't have to admit it, but I know it's there. As an artist, we're our biggest critics. As an
Absolutely.
author, I hate looking at what I write. As an artist, I only have one painting that I've done that I haven't let leave because I like it. Everything else I sell. My instruments, I play when I make. And so if there's a downside to being an instrument maker, I'm not allowed to buy an instrument. If I like what somebody else is making, my wife is just like, just make it yourself. It'll be better.
That's absolutely that's a good point. That happens a lot where it's like, well, I
Yeah.
could make that and I'm going to try, it may take a while, but it's part of the fun. And I think that's this advice, this conversation, you know, is that connection. And I hope that our listeners are feeling it too and can take a million things away from this for themselves and to share with others. So let me ask you, where can our listeners find you out there on the internet, etc.?
Well, schlubbrass.com. It's out there. You can contact me through that. I wish I could say it was up to date. I spend too much time in the shop. There's some good pictures of things that we've made, and it's a porthole for discussion. I can also be reached at schlubbrassworks@gmail.com.
And you're on Facebook. You have Schlub Brass Works page on Facebook as well, correct?
Yes, yes.
Great. Thank you again, George, for being a guest on the podcast and sharing all of these insights and about the unique way that you build instruments and create in a million other ways. I find it encouraging that there are no limitations really when we really kind of just put our minds to it and just try, like you said, just do it anyway. I'm astonished, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate your time to come here on the show as I do. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope someday I get to come back.
Wonderful. Absolutely. And thanks to our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed this podcast and found it valuable, please share it with others so we can reach people who might like a little bit of inspiration on their own creative journey. I'm Becky Gehrisch, and until next time, happy creating.
Hey there, creative minds! Are you ready for the next burst of inspiration? Make sure to subscribe to the Origins of Creativity podcast in your favorite podcast app for all our latest episodes. Visit bookligmedia.com/podcast for show details, links to connect with us, and so much more. This has been the Origins of Creativity podcast, where inspiration meets imagination.